Mr. Colakoglu, may I ask for your response of the 3 series of attacks, apparently all terrorist attacks, going on in Turkey, in Germany, and also in Switzerland, just over the past 24 hours? Briefly, sir.
Actually, we experienced very difficult time for yesterday night here in Turkey and Europe. So these are very tragic events. So now we can see that the world, our world is not very large, and also every incident, every negative things has a spillover effect to the other countries. So we can see the results yesterday. So we simply saying that the destabilization of Middle East in general, from Afghanistan to Syria and Iraq and then Libya. So there is a spillover effect to other countries. So we can experience these outcomes right now. So this also clearly indicate that the countries around the world come together and also find a logical ground to discuss and elaborate the issue in general.
Mr. Cui, what about you observing from China?
Yeah, exactly. I think firstly it shows how this turbulent world facing, more and more risks, more and more dangers. And also I think it will be a wake-up call for maybe every country, for everybody in the world. How is this, fragile, the peace in the world? So I think certainly it will also give some more dynamic to more of the countries and most of the international community.
Well,
to work
whether
together.
that is true or not, we'll have to look at the details. So
Yes.
why don't we, for today at least, focus on the issue between Turkey and Russia. Professor Colakoglu, what do you make so far of the identity of this young man who apparently has been the killer who killed the Russian diplomat? What do you think has been his background? What do you consider as the reasons why he is reacting or acting in such an extreme way?
First of all, yesterday night Turkey experienced a very tragic event. Ambassador Andrei Karlov was a well-respected diplomat and also well-known diplomat in Ankara. Personally, I had chance to meet several times. So it was a great loss for Turkish diplomatic community in Ankara. And also it was a great loss for the building relationship between Turkey and Russia in general, and also ongoing peace process, peace deal in Syria, because Ambassador Karlov was very active player on the ground, contacting with the Bashar regime and also opposition elements in Syria. So this was, of course, very tragic and negative event for that. So when we look at the murderer of the Ambassador Karlov, he was a police officer, off-duty police officer, and also killed. After killing him, also shouted this killing because of the Syrian issue and also because of the for the sake of the victims of the Aleppo. So there is a refer to Syrian clashes, particularly the clashes in Aleppo. So then this showing that how the situation is difficult to settle down the issues in Syria and also management of the bilateral relations between Turkey and Russia. So it's all these things are interrelated to each other.
Mr. Colakoglu, you talk about the outside negotiation between Turkey and Russia, but I think in a way that incident seemed to also reflect the internal division in the Turkish society about what role Turkey should play in terms of the crisis going on in Syria and which side the Turkey should be on. Briefly from you. Professor Colakoglu?
Yeah, okay. So this is also a clear sign that, of course, there is a discussion, debate in Turkey about the spillover effect of Syrian crisis to Turkey. But we can say that this is a general trend because of the output of the migration in general, and also some negative effect for security and safety of cities. So recently we talked about the PKK affiliated group terror attacks Also, they stemmed from Syrian crisis. But luckily here, the both sides, particularly the Turkey and Russia, have a consensus that the provocative attack to Russian ambassador will not affect the ongoing relations between Turkey and Russia, and also ongoing negotiations for the settlement of the Syrian issue.
We heard that point very clearly, but we still want to hear more, if you can, Professor, about what does that represent about the division within the Turkish society itself in terms of what to do about Syria. We're going to come back to you if you could answer us briefly about that. Let's for now, on the phone with us, Dmitry Babich, a political analyst from the Sputnik International News Agency based in Moscow. Mr. Babich, welcome to be with us on this program. So may I have your brief response about the latest incidents? What is Moscow making out of this about what's going on inside Turkey and possible Turkish-Russia relations, briefly?
Well, obviously, this assassination of our ambassador, it was directed to harming the relations between Russia and Turkey, spoiling them on the eve of a very important meeting, you know. However, that meeting is taking place in Moscow right now. It's a meeting of the Turkish, Russian, and Iranian foreign ministers. I am covering this meeting, so I'm joining you now by phone. And the news that I am covering, these are sensational news, because the Turkish defense minister, Fikri Ishik, called the evacuation of Aleppo a liberation. Let me stress it one more time, liberation of Aleppo. And he said that this liberation was made successfully by Russia. So this is a real revolution for the Turkish foreign policy, because, as you might know, Turkey, from the very beginning of the civil war in Syria, supported the armed opposition to Mr. Assad. But obviously now there was some kind of a deal reached between Russia, Turkey, and Ukraine. So the Turks will not insist on Aleppo being controlled by the rebels. In exchange, probably they will get some influence in the north of the country. But the main thing is that Russia, Turkey, and Iran agreed to fight against the extremists, against the terrorists in the north of Syria.
Right.
That means that the war in Syria may soon come to an end, at least in the sector controlled by the Turkish, Iranian, and the Russian.
Mr. Babich, may I say you are a little bit too optimistic from my perspective, but I want to ask a little bit more in detail about your judgment. Sir, to what extent do you think all sides, particularly now, since we're focusing on Turkish-Russia relations, the two countries are willing to compromise towards one another about their roles inside Syria and also about the territories which they support the local forces? One is government, one is more rebel forces, to have. Is that going to be a very fragile line that we are at this moment?
Well, of course, in the situation when we still have a civil war in Syria, every agreement is fragile. And I agree with you that one should not be over-optimistic. But quite clearly, it looks like Mr. Erdogan realized that he made a mistake when he got involved in the Syrian civil war, throwing his lot with just one of the sides.
All right.
And the difference between Mr. Erdogan and the EU, for example, the European Union or the United States, is that Mr. Erdogan can make the mistakes, but then he corrects them. He can correct his political course. We have seen it.
Okay.
The problem with the EU is that they cannot correct their mistake. If they decided to do something absurd, such as, for example, to live without Russian natural gas, they will push for it until they win the war.
Mr. Babich, we want to still focus on Turkish-Russia relations for now. You want to stay with us on the phone, please, sir. And let me come back to you, Mr. Cui, here in the Beijing studio. Supposed to be, and it is, a very tragic incident. A diplomat is killed. However, this seemed to be a turning point of the ongoing tough negotiations between Turkey and Russia about Syria.
Yes, certainly. I think now, because it's almost a live issue. I mean, for this tragedy, and also the attack of the target of the terrorism attack is a diplomat. So I think it shows so far, including United States, European Union, they showed a very, big condemns on this event. I think it shows now maybe at this moment, very maybe temporarily, there will be a joint alliance or joint feelings from every players to say that, okay, it shows that terrorism would be the common enemy. So I think maybe it will be out of the purpose of a sign to maybe damage or destroy these relations between Turkey and Russia, and to show some maybe immorality of action of Russia in Aleppo, in Syria. But I think now the effect will be in another direction.
I see.
Yeah.
Mr. Cui, as you may know, on the ground, the situation is very complicated.
Yes.
There's so many different forces backed by so many different powers in the region and beyond. And they are having sometimes cross interests, sometimes totally against one another, very fluid. We want to show our audience a little bit about that.
Yes.
Within the battered city of Aleppo, for example, there are several forces. On the government side, state forces are augmented by the Russian airstrike, as some say, and the Shia militias, including fighters from Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Lebanon, and Pakistan, some suggest. The predominantly Sunni opposition is made up of several rebel groups, many of whom have received financial aid from key opponents of the President Bashar Assad, including the US, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, at least according to media reports. Hardline Islamist groups are involved as well, most notably the Nusra Front. It announced it was cutting ties with Al-Qaeda, but we do not know at this moment what exactly happened. That is why we're saying, Mr. Cui, there's so many things on the ground that is fluid. And therefore, will these all moving factors eventually fall into the right places and therefore help an agreement to be created? That is the big question. Is this going to really help in the long term? I mean, what is happening now between Turkey and Russia? We see the two foreign ministers, they met, they talk to each other cordially, and also they talk about common goals. They apparently made compromises about where they were before, but how long will that last? What is the key interest here?
Yes, exactly. It's a very, important question for this current situation. Also, we know, especially on the issue of Syria, especially the political negotiation, everything. Indeed, because they are from a different stance. I mean, Turkey and Russia, they do have a bigger divergence because, as we know, Turkey is a part of the US-led alliance anti-terrorism in Syria, and also Turkey. The purpose of Turkey is to, take over this Assad regime, and it's different from a Russian stance. But now I think maybe if we call it a turning point of this, incident, that we be sure that, especially after the short-lived coup, as we know, it looks like the Erdogan government and the Russian government, they try to change the priority of the bilateral relations. Now it looks like the political trust become more important than the divergence between them in Syria. And also at this moment, once this incident happened, from Turkish side, it will try to show some more sensories to Russia, say that, okay, I will give some compensation to Russia.
How long will that sincerity, as being mentioned by Mr. Cui, Mr. Colakoglu, likely to last toward Russia? Do you agree with what the Chinese guest just said?
Actually, when we look at President Putin's message after the assassination of the Russian ambassador to Turkey, he underlined two things. One, the ongoing Turkish-Russian dialogue will continue, and the second one, Russia would fight against the terrorists, all terrorist groups, and particularly the terrorist groups behind this attack very decisively. So Of course, there are the different scenarios for that, because in the case of bilateral relationship, so there is a deep cooperation between two sides to enlighten the assassination against the Russian ambassador. But on the other, we don't know yet how Turkish and Russian cooperation will continue on the ground of Syria. Today, there is very important meeting in Moscow, trilateral ministerial meetings, consisted by foreign and defense
What
ministers.
do you think can be the result?
So this meeting,
what do you think can be the result, Professor? That's what we would really want to know. We know there's a meeting going on, but what we want to know is what can be the result of this meeting?
Actually, this meeting is a pre-planned meeting before the incident, but the Russian side confirmed that the meeting would be carried out, particularly on Syria. On the first side, the evacuation of the civilians in eastern Aleppo, rebel-held eastern Aleppo, and in the long run, the long-term settlement of Syrian issue in general.
Okay.
But also Russia has a facilitator role between Turkey and Iran. Of course, Turkey and Iran are neighbor countries having very good economic relations, very intensive economic relations. But on the other, Turkish-Iranian strategic and military cooperation is very, very weak.
Yes,
and
indeed.
Russia has a positive role to promote direct dialogue between Turkey and Iran.
Mr. Babich, do you think, Mr. Babich, do you think that Russia will be able to fulfill all these roles as being mentioned by our Turkish counterpart? Meanwhile, how long do you think the two sides will be able to work on it, given there is also another factor, both the EU and the United States, they all have an opinion about what is going on in Syria?
I can only tell you several facts which I think are important, and they will kind of explain my position, my rather optimistic position. Immediately after the assassination of the Russian ambassador, the Turkish president Recep Tayyip Erdogan called it an attack against Turkish nation, an attack against Turkish state, and an attack against Turkey. So that was very well received in Russia.
Okay.
And obviously the people who planned that this assassination would derail Russian-Turkish relations, these people miscalculated. And as for relations between Turkey, Russia, and the United States, that kind of triangle, if you look at the recent statements by the Turkish officials, Mr. Erdogan in the first place, you will see that Erdogan was much more critical of the United States than of Russia. So these are important facts which I think should be taken into account.
All right.
And they show that Turkey is becoming more and more an independent country, kind of distancing itself from NATO, because Turkey wants to conduct its own independent policy.
I see. Mr. Babich, thank you for your analysis. And let me come back finally to you, Mr. Cui, before we go. Mm-hmm. Obviously, all sides are planning about the agenda forward. Yeah. This is a very tragic incident, but this could be a turning point. We haven't count in the uncertainty of the president-elect, Mr. Trump, who has not been talking much at all about terrorism. Yeah. So what do you think all of these eventually could mean for the upcoming U.S. president into the White House and the U.S. relationship with Russia and also with Turkey, of course? Yeah,
I think if
briefly, if you can, sir.
If what mentioned by Mr. Trump during the campaign is true, and Mr. Trump will try to introduce the commitment of him into the policy once he takes the power. And I think now it's a good chance for Mr. Trump, firstly, to have a relaxation of the relations with Russia, and then to do something more, especially in cooperating with Russia in anti-terrorism.